So just now, I was in a Bible study online and I learned so many new things. And we were talking about the book of Exodus and about the Israelites and how they were kept captive and what the preacher said, or, what the person that was talking, or what the host, sorry, what the host was saying was that the Egyptians, they were literally kept captive for 400 years. They were slaves for 400 years. And that is a pretty long time to be a slave. And so what the host said was that because they were a slave for so long, it's like they embodied this mindset of being a slave. They adapted to being slaves. And as they adapted to that, their mindsets also changed. They were like rerouted or something, rerouted. They were changed. And they just closed themselves off to God. That is why in the desert, they they were telling God, we want to go back to Egypt. It was so much better there. And from our perspective, why would anybody want to go back to that kind of captivity, that kind of slavery? And back then, that is the kind of perspective I had. But then, with what I learned today, I learned, of course, they wanted to go back to being slaves. They were so used to being slaves that that's all they knew how to do. Of course, they wanted to go back to that form of captivity, even if they were suffering, even if it was painful. They wanted to go back to that. They couldn't let go of it. And so what I learned from in the Bible study was that the Israelites, they were so consumed in their own pain and suffering that they just closed themselves off to God. And the sad thing is about that is that another thing that the host said was that if they opened their hearts to God and if they pushed aside their suffering and their pain, God could have delivered them so much sooner. If they opened themselves to God, God could have moved. But because they closed themselves off to God and were consumed in their pain and in their suffering, because they just, they just were stuck in this idea of their pain and suffering, they did not let God move in their lives. And that's literally what we do sometimes. We're consumed by struggles, by suffering, by pain. We tend to just focus on our pain and on our suffering, and we just complain and complain, saying how life is so unfair. I'm stuck in all of these, things that I'm going through. And that's all we focus on. And then sometimes we even blame God. Like the Israelites, literally, they blamed God for what was happening to them. And so sometimes we just, we say, because of the suffering that we're going through, that God isn't helping us, God isn't near, God has abandoned us, or, God isn't real. Because if he was real, we wouldn't be in all of this suffering right now. That is how the enemy tricks us. And that just gave me so many questions in my head. Like, if God couldn't deliver the Israelites, how is he so powerful? And what I learned, or how I answered that question, was God can do anything. But when he tries to move into our life, if we don't let him, he's going to keep trying. But if we don't open up our hearts to him, then he's not going to be able to move in our lives. And he's not going to forcefully make us love him, because he wants us to love him freely. He wants our love for him to be real. So he's not going to force us to surrender ourselves to him. And so he tries to move in our lives. He tries to get through to us. But if we do not open up our hearts to him, if we do not center our, focus on him, he's not going to be able to move in our lives. And so if we really want to be delivered from all of this suffering, then we have to open our hearts to God, because he can't deliver us if we don't do that. And of course, even in our walk with God, we will, fall, we will face trials. But the only thing that would be different is that we will have God by our sides. And as long as we trust in God and confide in him and rely on him, we will be able to overcome any kind of suffering or trial that comes against us. And that is just what I learned in this Bible study. And it inspired so many questions in me that just got me thinking so much more. And I'm very glad I learned that, because literally just a message popped up on my phone from Discord, because I have a group there. So it was just Bible study, and I clicked on it, and I feel like God probably led me to that Bible study, because I literally ended up making a video out of it. So let God into your life. Open up your heart to God. Do not focus on your worries. If you can't, it's not about ignoring the storm. It's about focusing on God in the middle of the storm. It's about giving your worries to God, letting God handle the storm. So, yeah, I was wowed by what I learned in Bible study. And not because this isn't something I've learned, but because I learned so much more about Exodus and about how, what I've learned correlates to that and what the Israelites went through, and, just the whole process. So I hope this wowed you too. I know it definitely wowed me, and I am so grateful that I was able to go to that Bible study. But yeah, open up your heart to God, and don't let your pain and your suffering consume you to the point where you just close your heart off to God, or you start blaming God, or you just doubt and just start to believe that God isn't real. God loves you so much, and God bless you. I really hope that this wowed you as it wowed me. God bless you, and God loves you.